Today we're going to talk about the Electoral College's role in the election process.
Primary race is
right now the primary race is well underway, which may or may not have caused you to ask the question, what role does the Electoral College play in the presidential election?
It's the electoral vote that determines the presidency, not the nationwide popular vote. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't vote, as your vote has a great deal of significance within your state. The presidential election is decided by the combined results of 51 state elections, including D.C., and your vote helps determine which candidate receives your state's electoral votes. To start, I'll give you a little history on why our founding fathers included this in the Constitution, Article 2 to be specific. Electoral College is one of the many famous checks and balances written into the Constitution, was added for two reasons. One, to give states with small populations more of an equal weight in the presidential election. This is the same principle that was used to create the U.S. Senate, which allows 2 senators per state regardless of population. And the way they check and balance that is the House of Representatives is actually tied to population. So, similar to this, the Electoral College was allocated 1 vote for each state, regardless of how many members of the House represent that state. However, representatives would vote for how that 1 vote would be cast, and if the initial vote was a tie, then the deadlock would have to be broken. So the second reason is they didn't really trust the common man to be able to make an informed decision on which candidate would make the best president. At the time the Constitution was written, not many people knew much about government, politics, or presidential elections. Furthermore, a large part of the population was farmers and lived in rural areas, and was way more concerned with feeding and clothing their own families than politics. Many of them could not read or write, which made it even harder for them to be involved in the election process. Despite these obstacles to the common man, the Founding Fathers still believed they had a right to vote, and so the Electoral College was born as a safety measure. Today, 538 electoral votes are divided among the states. The allocation corresponds to the number of representatives and senators that each state sends to Congress, which is based on state population as reported by the U.S. Census. Distribution of the electoral votes can vary every 10 years depending on the census report. So each state gets 1 elector vote for each House representative and 1 for each of its 2 senators. Based on this system, each state gets at least 3 electoral votes. And you'll note the Constitution grants each state 2 senators and at least 1 representative, which is where you get the number 3 from. Together, this constitutes 535 electoral votes, and the remaining 3 come from the District of Columbia. And this was due to the 23rd Amendment granted D.C. the same number of votes as the least populated state. So you may be asking yourself how the electors are elected and who does this responsibility fall upon? Well, the selection process varies state by state. Generally, the political parties nominate electors at the state party conventions or by a vote of the party's central committee in each state. Electors may be state elected officials, party leaders, or persons who have a personal or political affiliation with the presidential candidate. The Constitution does have a few legalese pertaining to who can be an elector, but not many. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 provides that no senator, representative, or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. As a historical matter, the 14th Amendment provides that state officials who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States are given aid and comfort to its enemies or disqualified for serving as electors. Blah, 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 blah. For more on your particular state's qualifications, you can look up your own state's Certificate of Ascertainment. There are lots of other intricacies regarding the Electoral College, but this video should mostly have covered the basics. For more information on how the electoral process works in your state specifically, contact your Secretary of State. So to recap, when we as Americans cast our vote for the next presidential candidate, we are actually casting our votes for electors who in turn cast their votes for the candidates. Technically speaking, the electors do not have to vote for anyone. The Constitution does not require them to do so, and there have been several elections where the popular vote and electors' vote did not align. But tradition holds that the electors vote for the candidate chosen by their state, and most electors do not break tradition. So, throughout history, more than 99% of electors have voted as pledged. Usually, the meeting of the Electoral College, which takes place after the presidential election to count and tally the votes, is just a formality. When the elector votes have been counted, the candidate with the majority wins, and this usually matches the popular vote. In case you were curious, there are 4 elections where Electoral College vote and popular vote did not align. Election of 1800, election of 1824, election of 1876, and most recently, the election of 2000. So now that you know how the system works, educate yourself on the candidates and get out there and vote. As John Quincy Adams said, always vote for principle. Though you may vote alone, you will cherish the sweetest reflection that your vote is never lost.